What's up, everybody? George and Max coming back at you with another midnight minisode. Um, we're talking about Spider-Man No Way Home, the more fun stuff version, the re-release of the highest grossing film of 2021 that made most of its money in 2022, probably. Um, but yeah, a lot more fun stuff. 13 minutes worth, roughly.
Yep.
Um, I this is the fourth time I've seen the film in theaters. I'm sure you're close to that number too. Um, yeah, it's tremendous, and the more fun stuff version was great, right?
Oh yeah, it was a lot of fun. And we'll get into the specifics in a couple of minutes, but some of it, sure, threw off the pace, was
Whatever.
unnecessary, but they labeled it right. It was a lot of fun, right? I mean, everything about it, you know, it was enjoyable. Like everything, it was super, super fun.
It was more fun. It was more
Yeah.
stuff, and the stuff was more fun.
Yeah,
So properly labeled.
for sure.
So let's get into some of the big ones. Because again, there were moments that you had a couple of extra lines added to a scene
Yep.
here and there. There were five big ones, and I hope I counted correctly just now when I guessed. But the first one is with Agent Cleary at the Department of Damage Control, right after Peter and May and Ned and MJ are arrested and brought in for questioning about the drone attack in London at the end of Spider-Man Far From Home. It was really fun to see one, Agent Cleary have a much bigger role here, and two, the content of what was given.
Yeah. I mean, he was great in his like 2 minutes of screen time in the theatrical release or
Yeah.
whatever, probably around that, maybe less. Um, and honestly, I think this is one of the ones that they could have kept in and it would have made complete sense. It just would have given him a little bit more screen time, and that's totally fine. Um,
One thing I noticed in that opening, or not in that opening, but in that first extended, more fun stuff, MFS for shorthand, um, is that there were scenes like when he's talking to May that were cut differently in this version. You get the same dialogue when Cleary is talking to May about uh, being Peter's legal guardian and encouraging him to be Spider-Man.
mhm.
In the theatrical cut, the shots all on May, the focus is all on May, and in the more fun stuff version, there's so much more Cleary. You're seeing his
Yeah.
face so much more, and then there's the whole conversation that he has with Peter about national monuments with the
Yep.
diagrams and all the poster board. It was so funny, and I hope we get to see more of him.
Yeah, and I think there is also another little aspect too of, and memory could be leaving me at this moment, but um Peter describing the drones and everything, I think they added a little bit more there. And then you actually get the shot, you get like a bigger shot of Cleary slamming the books down, sort of the records down onto the table, which you got in the trailer. Um, but I don't think actually made it into the theatrical cut. I might be wrong about that. I don't remember though.
We should look back at I think one of the first mini-sodes we did when we looked at the No Way Home trailer.
Yeah, we'll need to do that.
We could do a review of our review of the trailer.
There you go.
So then there is the sequence where Peter is talking to Matt Murdock. There's a little bit more there, and we'll get to Matt Murdock more in a second. Um, you've got moments in the uh, Undercroft at the Sanctum Sanctorum when MJ and Ned are figuring out how to approach their mission. The Monster Mash is playing for some reason.
Yep.
I mean,
And Ned's just kind of knocking stuff over. Like that's
I
really
skipped one.
it.
I skipped one.
Hmm.
Ned's just knocking stuff over. That's the bottom line for that scene.
Oh yeah.
Betty Brant's interviews. How did I miss that? That
True.
happens earlier.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
we're talking about with completely throwing off the pacing. Because that's like 3 minutes where it's just Betty Brant and Gory Rice talking to characters we've seen before about what it means that Peter Parker is Spider-Man.
Yeah.
It it looks like high school student television.
As it should. Yeah.
It doesn't look like, even what we see with the Daily Bugle or .net or the rest of the film. It just
I mean,
it's
it's like what
shitty
their
high school TV.
yeah, it's like what their production is for the normal newscasts. These are just, you know, it's just what they have, right? It's the budget that they're operating within. And, I think it was Hannibal Buress who said, this is a science school. Two push-ups is a miracle. Like these kids are not artists either, right? And so they're not going to be the ones coming up with some creative and well thought out and beautiful design and production value within the budget of, I don't know, like $200 a year or something.
But one of the very, very few things that I was disappointed about with the theatrical cut was only one scene with Hannibal Buress as Coach Wilson, uh, JB Smoove as Mr. Dell, and Martin Starr as Mr. Harrington. They're only in one scene. Granted, it's a brilliant scene when Peter first gets back to high school, but we got to see so much more of them in this
Yeah.
extended interviews.
Yeah, I
It
think they're great together. I mean, they're hilarious. Hannibal Buress is always going to be a funny guy. JB Smoove the same, and then Martin Starr is just wonderfully weird. In
the
his role.
range on this guy
Yeah,
as a comedic actor. I mean,
yeah,
Silicon Valley and Spider-Man Far From Home are two different ends of the spectrum for comedy, and he just nails both.
yeah.
Um,
But just going back to your original point, George, of throwing off the pace of with Betty Brant's interlude and interviews and everything. You're completely right. I we were talking about this before we jumped on, but there's no reason for it, and I understand why they cut the end. Like, I mean, they're kind of stupid, but they fit perfectly in what this re-release of the film was meant to do, which is just, add a little more color, a little bit more fun for
yeah,
people that had seen the movie.
it's probably the longest addition in terms of one big chunk. I don't think there's anything else in the more fun stuff version that is one continuous addition
Mm-mm.
that could exceed this in length. This is probably a solid 2.5 or 3 minutes.
Yeah, the only thing that I think even comes remotely close is one that we're gonna talk about later.
I'm glad you're holding off on naming what it is, even though
Yeah.
everyone probably already knows. Um, so then we get the scene with MJ and Ned listening to the Monster Mash. Um, Subtext for what the mission is mashing monsters. I don't. That,
No, no, no. We're
never mind.
cure
It's
we're
just
curing
fun.
we're curing the monsters.
Oh, we're gonna person ass. You're right.
Yeah, yeah.
Cure that ass. Uh, so then we get another scene with Matt Murdock,
Hmm.
which the cameo when the film first was released was one of the biggest moments in the theater, other than Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield showing up.
Woo.
Because people talked about Charlie Cox showing up.
It's more
Daredevil
of a
wasn't
joke.
in
Yeah.
the MCU yet.
Mm-mm.
Um, but now, he's gonna be one of the big figures of Phase 5. We're in Phase 4 right now. He's gonna be in She-Hulk probably tomorrow, Episode 4. Episode 4 has been huge in MCU TV shows.
Woo.
So we may see Matt Murdock as soon as later today if this goes up at midnight. And he's in a second scene in the more fun stuff version where it provides what I found to be essential context for Happy Hogan going back to his condo
Yeah, I
because
agree.
he's in a deposition with the Department of Damage Control. Shout out Agent Cleary. Would love to see him and Matt Murdock teaming up or going after each other. Um,
Probably that one.
Probably that one. Uh, but
Or maybe
Happy
Murdoch
looks at his
teaming up with Agent Cleary and Agent Cleary going after Daredevil.
yeah, maybe that'll be Daredevil Born Again.
Maybe. I mean, there's so many different ways
Unless
they could go
unless
with
that's going
that.
to be season 4 of Daredevil, which
Which,
I
yes,
I
we
just
need to
finished
do
season
that.
2, so let's keep
Ooh.
that going.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, but yeah, Happy's looking at his doorbell cam. He sees, you know, all of these multiversal trespassers,
Mhm.
and then he goes back to his condo. So context, and we get more Matt Murdock.
Yeah, it's context that, maybe in the theatrical version, you're like, I didn't really need it because he's just driving in a car and, that's very normal. But then with it, you're like, oh, I mean, that makes sense. I understand where he is, what his whereabouts are. And also, I think it adds a little bit, it adds another layer to um, what happens next on his way back to the apartment once he finally arrives, and the scene he arrives at, which is when just after May is struck by Green Goblin's glider and is dying, and then eventually dies in Peter's arms, and Happy pulls up at that exact moment, and it just shows that one, this is where he's coming from. This is, he already is in legal trouble and he's willing to risk it all again. And protect Peter from getting shot and killed and, you know, in this
Yeah,
moment of intense grief.
and Jon Favreau. I mean, we could talk about his performance in the MCU and in this film.
Yeah.
But now let's get into the biggest thing that people were most excited for this cut that definitely
Yep.
delivered. I'm gonna ask for your phone number when all this is over. Uh, that's a reference to the line delivered by Andrew Garfield to Tobey Maguire. It's the three Spider-Men shooting the shit
Mm-hmm.
on the Statue of Liberty before the villains show up. It's just so honestly, this gets me really excited for Secret Wars because you got to think if they're tying this all together in the multiverse, Toby and Andrew are going to come back for Secret Wars. Like we got a sense of what their relationship could be between the two of them and with Tom Holland's Peter Parker, but like some of the dialogue here, especially from Andrew Garfield, from Peter 3, they want to team up again.
It's golden. I mean, yeah,
I
and
could have watched
especially,
45 minutes of those three just talking, and it's the same
oh
shots
yeah.
of each of them.
Yeah.
You get the sort of upward angle at Toby, you get sort of the downward angle at Andrew, and you got Tom up top.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same three shots as they converse. And
Yeah.
it's so much fun.
Yeah, it really is. And, I think especially after the events of this movie and thinking long term and when Secret Wars is scheduled to come out,
3 years.
3 years, Tom Holland's Spider-Man is going to be a completely different character by that point. I mean, he already is by the end of the movie, right?
Yeah.
It's just going to be so cool, especially if Toby and Andrew come back and they're like old Spider-Man, but then Tom is like sort of where they were at the end of this movie, and it just seeing how they interact, but then also show the affection that they have between the three of them. I mean, it's off camera too, or
You
not
saw in that
off camera,
intro.
but you saw it. That's what I was going to talk about. You see it in the intro. They loved working together, and Toby and Andrew, they love Peter Parker. They love playing Spider-Man. and bringing him to life on screen. And so having that just adoration between the three men and being able to bring that into the MCU, I think will be fantastic, right? That's a great energy to have.
Yeah, you got people who love the characters they're playing.
Yeah.
And I think with a lot of the additions that they're talking about at D23 this weekend in terms of cast, you're going to get more people who are, first of all, exceptionally talented,
Hmm.
and second of all, who are going to really, really love playing these characters. Because you're getting the X-Men, you're getting the Fantastic Four. These are beloved comic book characters. These are
That people have
iconic,
been, yeah, that
um,
people have been waiting for to be done justice for a long time, right?
especially the four.
Especially the Fantastic Four, which has gone through two iterations, three films, to not much commercial or critical or audience favorability and success. You've got at least the X-Men has a good history and a solid history of producing some actually well done films and storylines. But just continuing that legacy with a new batch of characters, a new cast. Um, I mean, there's so much out there that is gonna be brought together at some point. We don't know when, but at some point,
Hopefully D23.
yeah,
So yeah, my final thought on the more fun stuff version is that it felt like 2 hours and 41 minutes. The
it did.
theatrical cut flies by in 2 hours 28 minutes, which is shocking. Like it's
Hmm.
the same, almost the same length as Infinity War, maybe off by a minute or two. And it just the pacing of the theatrical cut is exceptional. This felt really long, but I didn't want it to end.
Yeah, I mean that's a great point. I think it helps that it was definitely the right decision, I think, to take that stuff out and maybe keep some of it, but I'm not going to argue with the final product we got in the theatrical cut. Um, but having seen the film so many times already and seeing the original theatrical, it really the point wasn't for me to go in and see a totally new film. That's not what I was expecting. I just wanted the more fun stuff, and we got it.
Yeah,
I
we got
mean,
it.
one more thing quickly though, very briefly, I think we should talk about the post credit scene.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Betty Brant's long end of high school monologue.
Yeah, it kind of fits, right? It
Yeah,
kind
I
of
mean,
it,
you
it
weren't going to
fits
show the
with
Multiverse of Madness trailer again, so yeah, it fits the
yeah.
vibe of what happens at the end.
It's also a lot like I think it was Homecoming, with Captain America coming out and doing that long thing of, sometimes patience, like waiting for something and you have expectations and you don't get it. And that's okay. It was
I
kind of
don't think it
like
was
that.
as campy as
Mm-mm.
Steve
No, it
Rogers in
wasn't. No,
Homecoming
no,
or Bruce Campbell in Multiverse of Madness.
no.
Um, but yeah, it was a fun way of
Yeah.
wrapping it up.
Yeah. And I also think it does fit with what we've gotten in phase four, which is not a lot of consequence in our mid and post credit scenes. So,
With the
in
exception of Shang-Chi.
with the exception of Shang-Chi and even sort of maybe kind of, who knows, the mid credit scene of No Way Home.
Eternals.
No, no. Well, those two, but No Way Home with the Venom goo and everything. Like,
Oh,
but for
we'll
the
see how that's paid
larger
off.
it is, yeah. But for the majority of projects, we really haven't gotten anything of much significance. And so I think putting it in a re-release of No Way Home when far fewer people are going to go see this movie, it wouldn't make sense to have anything of substance, I don't
Yeah.
think. Yeah.
Yeah, the iconic Spaceballs line, uh, the search for more money. Yeah, Marvel and Sony are gonna make a shit ton of money on this film. So what?
Yep.
This is the fifth time I've seen this movie, fourth in theaters. I don't care. I'm gonna keep
I'll see
wanting
it
to see it.
again.
I would love to see it again. So yeah, that does it for this midnight minisode. Let us know what you thought of the more fun stuff MFS version of Spider-Man No Way Home. No one calls it that. I don't know why I've been calling it that. But yeah, it's still in theaters for at least another couple of days, I think. Um, go see it. It'll probably be on digital at some point. Enjoy. Good night.
Good night.